What's up, everyone? I'm doing probably the least prepared rant I've ever done. I mean, no notes or anything. I'm just been like very emotional the past few days, both good and bad. Bad, I've got some grief in my head and some sadness and some guilt and shame and shit. But on this positive side, I've been I went to see Cobra, John Zorn's Cobra last week. It was the 40th anniversary of the premiere of Cobra, and I have just been renewed, just flooded with a renewed sense of purpose as an artist, and just the mission of what I'm even doing here, and just reconnected with some kind of wellspring, with some kind of the wellspring that we all know. It's just yeah. I mean, I don't know if you know Cobra. It's one of John Zorn's game pieces where he's like, it's not like a written out piece. It's like a game for improvisers. And so they had like 12 people up there, all, mostly like friends of mine, collaborators. It was so amazing to see them up there. And it's like, it's like this game of like hand signals and cards and cues and shit. And the players can make decisions too, and everyone's making eye contact and holding up signs, and it ends up sounding like John Zorn. I mean, if you don't know his music, you got to go do some homework and come back and watch the channel. But I mean, it ends up sounding very much like his stuff. It's like cut up, very hard cut, cartoon music, cartoon. Attention span. Flicking the channels on a remote control. Stylistic hopping. And it was just the joy of music, of just the musicians, like just the joy that you couldn't dislike this. No one could look at this and not be uplifted. I mean, just the sheer joy of playing music and just what the music is, man. It's just, just this aesthetically, I mean, that music, to see this live, they're just hitting you with just difference. It's like this trance of the opposite of a trance. It's just, to say attention deficit disorder is stupid, ADHD. It's not, or maybe it is, but like, it's, they used to call it postmodern back when that was a word. But to be just hit with this relentless flow of like difference. I mean, it was too short. That was my only criticism. I could have watched it for like 2 hours, which rarely I feel that way. Even my favorite music on earth, I don't want to watch 2 hours of it. But it was it was like a little under an hour. I was like, I want more of this. But it's also just Zorn, man. What that guy means to me as a musician and just as a person, he's like a real father figure to me. What he, and you know what? I'm not even going to call him a genius, because that's almost not really the point. I don't even take anything from him really aesthetically. I mean, as far as that hard cut up, pastiche kind of thing, my music is quite not like that. But just what he's about as an artist, it's like, I just watching it brought me back to just the point of why I'm here, why I'm doing this. And it really just reminded me of just the avant-garde, what that is. It can mean a lot of things, I suppose, but this spirit of just going beyond. The whole feeling of it was just this feeling of just pushing and reaching and just tearing at the fabric of reality, like pulling a thread of just not satisfied with what is, and just going for other worlds. I mean, and it's like, some of this is not that original to say, but I'm flooded with this the past couple days. It's like that old alchemical, I don't know if it's a woodcut. I mean, you've probably seen this. I have to describe it. It's like where the wizard guy is like, there's the night sky, and it's like the dome of the, or no, it's like the dome of like the day, I guess. And he's like lifting up the corner of the scene like a curtain, and there's like night behind the curtain. I can't describe it. You've seen this. Just this thing of other worlds. I don't know if you'd call it seeking other worlds or creating other worlds. But the thing that's so crazy to me, the way I think about it is just okay, well, here's the thing, all right? Cobra, I had seen it performed before with totally different musicians because it was back when I was in high school. And it was pretty much, not the very first, but one of the first things of like experimental music, capital E, that I had ever seen. It was at the Knitting Factory. It wasn't Zorn conducting. I think it was Yamataka I from the Boredoms. And like Mike Patton was in the group, and I think Elliot Sharp. And I remember watching this, and I remember thinking like, okay, I live in the future. I'm living in the future. And I still felt that last Friday watching this, decades later, even though I know what it is now. And that's what was so amazing. I mean, I know what Cobra is now. I've checked out all this crazy music since then and made all this crazy music. And yet still I had this feeling of like I'm living in the future. It was still like futuristic, even when it had become somewhat familiar. But I had this feeling when I was a kid and I saw this at the old Knitting Factory on Leonard Street, not the original, but the classic 90s one, Knitting Factory. I felt like I'm living in the future, and I felt like anything is possible. No, this past Friday I felt like anything is possible. That was the sentence in my head. But back when I was a kid and I saw it, the sentence was, I'm living in the future, and the other sentence was, something roughly like the world that I'm living in is not what I thought it was. So it didn't even feel like, oh, I'm entering another world. It was like, no, this has been here. It's just going on, and now I know about it, and I didn't know I was living in a world that had this in it. This world isn't what I thought it was. I'm now, it was so fucking deep. And just like Zorn, man, it just reconnected me with just who he is to me, man, because he, like, it wasn't just that seeing Cobra that time when I was a kid that got me into it. It's like the way I first found out about Zorn, okay, was through Mike Patton. I'm not unique in this, okay? But it's like, I was into metal and rock and punk and alternative grunge type shit and pop music when I was like preteen, whatever, teenager. I started to get into jazz, okay? So, all right, this is kind of like some kind of achievement. It's high art music. I don't know where my place in it is. I'm not really an artiste yet, but I'm kind of being like, oh, maybe I'm Charlie Looker, this kind of thing. And then I go to a Faith No More show in 95. Me and Chuck Stern, the great composer who died last year. I'll be doing a video on him just soon, once I compile all this stuff. But it was me and Chuck, and we went to see Faith No More at the at the Roseland in 95. It was the King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime tour. And we want to meet Patton. We're obsessed with Patton, right? And so we find out, this is fucking gay, but we find out that we find out the hotel he's staying at, and we're like, yo, we want to like meet Patton, right? So we're lurking there, and it's me and Chuck and this like total groupie girl, this like hot girl who was was waiting there to like stalk him as well. And she was saying, she was like, like he's going to be later. We don't end up meeting Patton, but she's like, later on, Patton is playing this solo thing at this jazz club downtown with this jazz musician. I was like, that's crazy. I want to see this. And we go, and Zorn is doing alto sax, squealing improvisation. Patton is doing noise, electronics, and voice, because he had just put out his solo record, Adult Themes for Voice, on Zorn's label, Tzadik. So from this, so I'm like, this was before I saw Cobra the first time, but this is the first time I saw Zorn. So it was just like, okay, this exists now. This is part of the world that I've been living in. That's crazy. Noise music exists. Free jazz exists. Yeah. And then I hadn't even really thought of this in years, thinking about just how important Zorn was for getting me into just all experimental music. Because it's not just him like, oh, I liked his music and therefore I liked other experimental music. That's not how it is, man. It's like, so this is the 90s, right? I'm in high school. The internet, it exists, but there's not that much stuff on it. Maybe Faith No More has a website, faithnomore.com. There's no Zorn.com. You don't find out about stuff on the internet. So I was just today, I was like, wait a minute. Zorn got me in all this stuff? Because I was like, wait, he wasn't in magazines. How did this go down? And then I realized, I'm like, yeah, Zorn's label, Tzadik, that still exists, but was really popping in the 90s, they had, the records they put out, if you've seen the CDs, there's always a little black side thing on the side. There's a little black cardboard foldy thing on the side of the record that tells you about the record. And at HMV, the, I think now defunct, I don't know, record store on 86th and Lexington, me and Chuck Stern would go every Friday after school, and we would go to HMV, and they had within the, I can't remember whether it was within the classical or within the jazz section, there was one rack called New Music, and it was almost all Zorn stuff, Tzadik. He got his record label in HMV, okay? And we're talking like the whole thing, and there were a few other labels represented there also, but it was just like a rack of CDs of just this like records that Zorn was putting out. And they're like, it's just like all this, it wasn't, Patton was like one of the bigger acts on this thing. We're talking like Bob Ostertag, Elliot Sharp, I mean, all of that downtown shit. And it's like, and I realized I learned about the entire history of 20th century experimental music from reading these little black side flap insert things on these records on Tzadik. And you would look and you'd be like, Zorn, the new Zorn thing. This piece is inspired by Morton Feldman. Who's Morton Feldman? And then, I go and look at the Morton Feldman CDs, etc. It's like, it was always listing influences, name dropping and name checking and stuff. Name dropping is when it's cynical, name checking. And it was like an education just reading these little black side flap things. And Chuck and I, we would go and we would just take like the entire row of things, and we would sit down and we would just read these things and be like, what's this one? What do you think this sounds like? Right? So back then, right, you had to like buy CDs, right? You had to actually like pay money. And, despite our relatively privileged backgrounds, we did not have unlimited money to buy CDs. So like buying a CD meant you're actually like, okay, it's like $15. It like, where am I going to, which one of these am I going to check out? Thing is, HMV had this return policy, which was not widely known, but you could return it without any good reason, right? So we're like, fuck, let's just buy every single one of these things and tape the good shit, dub the good shit, and just return it. So we would just, with one $15 purchase, just rotate through all these things to devour rows of these Tzadik records, man. And it's just like, it didn't even occur to me till like seeing the show. I'm like, it was just like him, dude, him. Yeah, man. I cannot even, it's just inestimable, his influence on me. And also just as like this vision of just like, not just learning about the history, but just like being like, what kind of artist? It's like a type of artist. That's why I'm talking about this avant-garde shit, this thing of like going beyond. Because then I was thinking like, well, a lot of my stuff, not a lot of it, but I have stuff that literally sounds like Alice in Chains Unplugged, or just a Leonard Cohen song, or Depeche Mode. I mean, I have stuff that's in the box. So does Zorn, actually, not those artists, but he has stuff that is just jazz. Main point, though, is that, like, at that age, I was like, I was into, like, rock, metal, punk, grunge, like, indie rock, And then I was getting into jazz, but that was, like, more of an interest. And the passion was there, but nowhere near the same passion I had for rock and metal and stuff. But you know, but I'm like getting it. But like as a rock guy, I'm like, I'm not going to be a rock guy because you just play in bands and then the band breaks up and where are you? You know, like I want to be, what am I going to be? What kind of, how am I going to have a life in music? You know? And I get into jazz. I'm like, oh, well, this is cool. You can be a jazz musician, which means that you have your own thing. You have your thing and then you can put your thing with other people's things. So that's, okay, so that's a little bit more on, and I don't like carving my own voice, and plus there's discipline and practice and advancement. I like that, but I'm like, man, jazz is. I mean, it's like I'm finding my own voice within a language that is from the like, you know, it's like jazz standards from the 30s. I'm like, this is not my language, but like, and I wasn't even really that into classical music, so the word composer just didn't even cross my mind. And this was like this Tzadik thing, and Zorn via Patton was where I got the idea. I was like, it was like Mike Patton is a composer. I was like, what, like Mozart? What? He's a composer? And I'm like, oh, right. Like if you just build your own world and make all these decisions yourself and write music, that's being a composer, whether it's on a 4-track with your lo-fi shit, or writing things down, or just playing things yourself, or verbally telling people what to do. I mean, it's collaborative. It's also, you're a composer if you're collaborative as well, but it's not as much the image. I'm talking about the image, the self-image of how you see yourself. It was like, this is the thing where I'm like, I want to be like Zorn. And again, aesthetically, it didn't go that way. Career-wise, it has not gone that way. I mean, there's still the rest of my life, of course. But as far as the fortune and fame that Zorn has achieved has not, you know, this is like how he pulled that off is pretty alchemical, you know. But I mean, yeah, if you think Kurt Cobain becoming like a rich rock star in the 90s is crazy, think about the fact that Zorn pulled that off. But the thing is, it's funny also because like in when I was a kid in high school, the idea of like focusing on the work of music and the pure inspiration, that didn't at that point feel separate from like working on having a career, because at that age you're so naive. You're like, well, you get famous by being good at a thing. It's like, and then you hit like even 20 and you're like, oh, there's also like games. Not Cobra games, but cynical games. But the thing that's so sick, man, is that just like seeing Cobra, like just watching this, it's like any idea of the career or the professionalism or even achievement, you know, it was just not the thing, man. The purity of this vision and the purity of the experience. And it's funny to use the word pure because that's not a word that gets thrown around about music like Zorn, because the stuff is so stylistically schizophrenic and eclectic and polystylistic and, you know, postmodern they used to call it. But it's pure. There was purity that I was looking at, man. Just like absolute integrity, man. Absolute integrity. Especially it's like Cobra, man. It's like, okay, he got famous, and I guess when he wrote Cobra, like premiered it in '84, like, okay, I guess he was already kind of getting successful. Like it wasn't like he was nobody or whatever. But I mean, coming up with that is not like a fucking career move. It's really not that's not making moves in the industry. I mean, that is just a pure, like, just this shit, like, he's got these cue cards, and then it's like there's some other, and it's so fun not knowing what you're watching, not knowing what the rules of this game are. Like, there's this shit where sometimes he puts on this baseball cap, and, like, that changes the game or something, and then people have these headbands, like, everyone can put on a headband, and that means that they're doing different rules, I don't know, affecting the game. Overriding each other's decisions. Yeah, it was beautiful, man. I mean, I don't even know if I'm ranting so hard I can't remember if I even said this, but I mean, just the way in which his vision is like so pure, and he's like such a maverick and visionary as a sort of solitary individual, but also at the same time how much Cobra, just how clearly and logically it is an extension of stuff that had happened before. If I'm repeating myself from before, forgive me, but it's like this kind of thing of like indeterminate structures and like gaming and cueing and this kind of thing. I mean, it totally goes back to like Earl Brown and John Cage and like the New York school. Totally goes back to Cornelius Cardew, who I don't know a ton about, but for sure goes back to him. Big time goes back to the AACM and that whole like African American, school of avant-garde music dealing with improvisation and composition integrated. Anthony Braxton, Roscoe Mitchell, and I forget if Butch Morris was AACM. I should know that. That's embarrassing, but yeah, Butch Morris for sure. So that's the thing, total visionary, but also completely part of various traditions. And the avant-garde thing, man, just that word, and identifying with it, which I always have, but just having that identification for me, I feel reflooded with it. Using a liquid metaphor instead of the hard one I was going to use, but the way I feel is like it's not, sometimes there's that vibe of when you think about avant-garde or experimental music. I'm not feeling it in that way of where it's like part of progress. I guess you could see it that way, like an extension when I was talking about the evolution, but I am critical of the word progress on this channel. You'll hear me, it's like a riff I'm often going on. So yeah, I don't, at least personally for myself, I don't relate to that sense of avant-gardeness in the sense of like, there's a progression of linear musical history and I am going to add to it, and there is a teleology and the synthesis, the Hegelian, I am now synthesizing. I don't relate to that, it's just a spirit of just going beyond and just tearing and eroding. That sounds negative, the tearing away, but tearing the veil is just something that's like pushing, man. I mean, you know what it is? It's like something that goes beyond personal expression, because I'm into personal expression. I wear my heart on my sleeve a lot of the time. There's a lot about my life and my music, and there's a lot about my vibe, etc. But the avant-garde thing is an extra thing. It's an extra, not only is it an extra, it's a different thing that doesn't require the personal expression. I just happen to do the personal expression. But Cobra, I mean, would you say that that's Zorn's heart and soul? It's his vision, it's his aesthetic. It sounds like Zorn, but it's not so much an it's like more cosmically minded or something, or, just this pushing. That I was gonna make this rant shorter because I want to get to work. I'm getting to work on this new solo music. Now my voice may be a little compromised for the practicing I was about to do, but I had to get this off my chest and just strike while the iron's hot, because I was gonna do a video complaining about some shit and I did this instead. Aren't you all glad? All right, yeah, John Zorn, God bless, icon.